The end came like a storm, breaking over a brittle dawn. On a fateful day in the late spring of 1963, the villagers of San Isidro trudged once more through the jungle's suffocating embrace, drawn to the mountain cave for their monthly descent into madness. The air was thick with the stench of blood and betrayal as Isabella, Mateo, Javier, and Luis presided over their grim rite. The tainted brew, now a vile mix of human blood and marijuana, passed from trembling hands to eager lips, binding the crowd in a haze of addiction and delusion. Then Luis stepped forward, his voice a jagged blade, calling for another soul to offer itself to the ancient gods. This time, it was Selena Ortiz who answered, a young woman with fire in her veins, stepping toward the altar with a zealot's gleam in her eyes. But the spell shattered. Hector Ruiz, Selena's childhood love, could no longer stomach the slaughter. His heart broke as he lunged forward, grabbing her arm just before she reached the stone slab, pleading with a voice raw from despair. She wouldn't hear him. Her mind was lost to the promise of divine bliss, a paradise she'd been sold by the twins' lies. In a frenzied struggle, she seized a rock and pressed it into his hands, begging him to end her life for the gods. They wrestled. She stumbled, and the crowd surged in. Hector was battered senseless, and Selena, poor, deluded Selena, was pummeled with stones until her breath stilled. When Hector awoke, her lifeless body lay atop the altar, her heart carved out by Javier and Luis in a frenzy of gore. Grief and fury ignited in him. He fought to reach the brothers, fists swinging, but the tide of believers overwhelmed him. Selena was gone, her remains drained and set ablaze. Broken but unbowed, Hector fled the cave, vowing to bring the nightmare crashing down. He staggered back to San Isidro, gathered his wife and 4 children, and set out at first light for the nearest outpost of law in Santa Clara. There, he spilled the horrors to Inspector Rafael Torres, a grizzled man whose eyes hardened with every word. Hector named names, his voice shaking as he recounted the cult's atrocities, and Torres scratched them into a worn notebook. "Go back," the inspector urged. "Act as if nothing's changed. I'll handle the rest." With a posse of hardened officers, Torres marched toward San Isidro, steel in their hearts and guns at their sides. But Javier and Luis were waiting. When Hector returned, they pounced, slashing his throat with a machete's cold kiss, yet not before learning the law was closing in. Torres and his men stormed into San Isidro along the rutted trail, met by Luis swaggering out to face them. The inspector demanded answers, his voice cutting through the tense air. Luis played the innocent farmer, all shrugs and lies, but Torres wasn't born yesterday. "Take him," he barked to his deputy, Miguel Sanchez. Quick as a snake, Luis drew his blade, slashing at Miguel with lethal intent. The deputy fell, lifeless, and before Luis could retreat to the mud-walled hut where the cultists rallied, Torres' men unleashed a hail of bullets. Luis crumpled, riddled with lead. Javier and the faithful fired back from their flimsy fortress, bullets tearing through the walls in a deadly storm. When the dust settled, Torres ordered his men forward. We shredded that hut until nothing inside could draw breath, he'd later recall. Inside, Javier lay dead among the fallen, a boy named Pablo Diaz, barely 14, caught in the crossfire. In the cave above, Isabella and Mateo were seized, their reign of terror snuffed out. Piled in a corner were the charred bones of 13 victims, Selena's among them, a grim testament to the cult's carnage. Torres ordered the remains collected for burial and the thatched shrine torched, its flames a funeral pyre for the madness. "It was the darkest chapter of my life," he'd say, his voice hollow. "After this, nothing can shake me." Interrogations revealed the poison had spread to nearby Las Flores, too vast for Santa Clara's small force to contain alone. Federal troops from Tampico descended, rounding up 40 souls. 12 were convicted of murder, while the twins were held as the net tightened around their shattered empire. The truth didn't survive unscathed. Online, Isabella's name morphed into a lurid myth, the Crimson Oracle, a supposed seductress who drank blood for pleasure. The web fixated on scandal, sidelining Mateo and pinning the cult's birth on Javier and Luis. Some spun tales of debauchery, painting Isabella as a Juarez streetwalker recruited by the brothers. A stretch, given the 150-mile trek across state lines. San Isidro's true place, near Toltepec, blurred into confusion, with Wikipedia pegging it wrongly in San Luis Potosi. Digging into the page's history revealed a sloppy copy-paste from Spanish sources in 2021, leaning on shaky blogs from 2002 and 2003. Distorted echoes of a Texas clipping from June 1963, which at least named the twins as the spark. One account stood taller, a 1964 interview by drifter Bill Carter with Inspector Torres, penned for Fate magazine and later etched into the Mammoth Book of Women Who Kill. Torres laid bare how Isabella and Mateo birthed the cult, only to lose it to their own lies. It's the clearest window we have, miles from the lurid nonsense of later tales, like one claiming Javier purified Selena in a lust-fueled rite while Isabella and Mateo indulged twisted desires. That homophobic fever dream bears no resemblance to the grim reality. San Isidro's scars endure. A warning whispered in the wind, a tale of faith twisted into a blade, and the reckoning that followed.